Sometimes the answers we spend years searching for arrive in a package we never expected. Emily Carter never imagined that an ordinary Tuesday afternoon would become the beginning of a mystery that would change everything she thought she knew about her life. At 35 years old, she had become an expert at managing challenges. As a single mother raising her 10-year-old daughter Sophie in a small rental house outside Columbus, Ohio, every dollar mattered and every day required careful planning. Her mornings started before sunrise. Her evenings ended long after most people had gone to bed, and the hours in between were filled with work, responsibilities, and constant determination. Despite the pressure, Emily rarely complained. She believed that hard work and kindness still mattered, even when life felt unfair. That afternoon, she returned home after a long shift at a local medical office. The cool autumn air carried the scent of fallen leaves as she walked toward her front porch. Sophie was still at an after-school program, giving Emily a rare moment of quiet before the evening routine began. As she reached the front door, something unusual caught her attention. A medium-sized package sat neatly beside the welcome mat. There was no company logo on the box, no shipping label from a recognizable business. Only her name appeared on a small white card attached to the top. Emily paused. She was not expecting any deliveries. Carefully, she picked up the package and carried it inside. It felt surprisingly light. She placed it on the kitchen table and studied it for several moments. Whoever had sent it had wrapped it with unusual care. The plain brown paper showed no signs of damage, and a dark blue ribbon had been tied around it with perfect precision. Emily checked every side of the box, searching for clues. There was no return address, no sender information, nothing that explained why it had arrived. Curiosity slowly replaced her hesitation. She untied the ribbon and removed the wrapping paper. Inside was a polished wooden box that looked decades old. The craftsmanship was beautiful. Delicate carvings decorated the lid, and the wood carried the rich color of something preserved with great care over many years. Emily frowned. She had never seen it before. Her heart beat a little faster as she opened the lid. Inside rested a silver locket, a folded letter, and a photograph. She reached for the photograph first. The image showed a young woman standing beside a large oak tree. The picture appeared old, perhaps 20 years old or more. What immediately caught Emily's attention was the woman's face. She looked strangely familiar. Not familiar in the way strangers sometimes resemble someone you know. This felt different. Emily stared at the photograph longer. Then she noticed something that made her stop breathing for a moment. The woman in the picture looked remarkably like her. Before she could process the discovery, the front door opened, and Sophie rushed inside, calling for her mother. Emily quickly looked back at the wooden box. The unanswered questions multiplied instantly. Who had sent this package? Why did the woman in the photograph look so much like her? And why did she suddenly feel as though a forgotten chapter of her life had just quietly arrived on her kitchen table? Emily quickly closed the wooden box just as Sophie entered the kitchen, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. The 10-year-old immediately noticed the unusual expression on her mother's face. "Is everything okay?" she asked. Emily forced a smile and nodded. "Everything is fine. I just received something unexpected." Sophie glanced at the package sitting on the table. "A present." "Maybe," Emily replied, "although I do not know who sent it." The mystery lingered in her mind throughout the evening. While preparing dinner and helping Sophie with homework, she found herself repeatedly thinking about the photograph. The resemblance between herself and the young woman felt too strong to dismiss as coincidence. After Sophie went to bed, Emily returned to the kitchen and carefully reopened the wooden box. This time she reached for the folded letter. Her pulse quickened as she unfolded the yellowed paper. The handwriting was elegant but unfamiliar. What surprised her most was its brevity. The letter contained only a few sentences. "If this box has reached you, the time has finally come. The answers you seek can be found where the oak still stands. Trust the path. You are closer to the truth than you realize." There was no signature, no date, no explanation. Emily read the message 3 times. Each reading only created more questions. She turned her attention to the silver locket resting beside the letter. The metal showed signs of age, but remained beautifully preserved. When she carefully opened it, she discovered 2 tiny photographs inside. One showed the same young woman from the larger picture. The second revealed a smiling man Emily had never seen before. Both images appeared decades old. She examined every detail, searching for anything familiar. Nothing came to mind, yet the strange feeling remained. Somehow these people felt connected to her. The next morning, Emily carried the photograph to her mother, Linda, who lived 20 minutes away. If anyone could explain the mystery, it would be her. As soon as Linda saw the image, her expression changed. The reaction lasted only a second before she recovered, but Emily noticed it immediately. "Do you recognize her?" Emily asked. Linda hesitated. "No, I do not think so." The answer felt unconvincing. Emily had known her mother her entire life. Something about her response seemed carefully controlled. "Are you sure?" Emily asked. Linda smiled weakly. "It is an old photograph. Lots of people look similar." The conversation moved on, but Emily could not shake the feeling that her mother knew more than she was saying. Driving home later that afternoon, she replayed the interaction repeatedly in her mind. The mystery no longer felt like a random package sent by mistake. The photograph, the letter, the locket, her mother's reaction. Somehow they were connected. That evening she searched the wooden box again, running her fingers along the interior panels. Suddenly, she felt something unusual beneath the velvet lining. Carefully lifting the fabric, she discovered a hidden compartment. Inside rested a small folded map and a handwritten note. The note contained only 6 words. "The oak tree still waits for you." Emily unfolded the map and stared in disbelief. A red circle had been drawn around a location less than 30 miles from her home. The same oak tree from the photograph might still exist. For the first time since the package arrived, Emily realized the mystery was no longer sitting inside a box on her kitchen table. It was waiting somewhere out there, and she had a feeling that finding it would change everything she thought she knew about her past. For the next 2 days, Emily tried to focus on her normal routine, but the mystery followed her everywhere. While answering phone calls at work, preparing meals, or helping Sophie study for school, her thoughts repeatedly drifted back to the photograph, the locket, and the map hidden inside the wooden box. The questions seemed endless. Who had sent the package? Why had her mother reacted so strangely? And why did the note suggest that the oak tree held answers about her past? By Saturday morning, curiosity had become impossible to ignore. After breakfast, Emily decided to visit the location marked on the map. Sophie was spending the afternoon with a friend, giving Emily several free hours she rarely enjoyed. She entered the address into her phone and began driving north through the Ohio countryside. The route led her away from busy streets and suburban neighborhoods toward rolling farmland and quiet roads lined with trees. Nearly 40 minutes later, she arrived at a small historic property that appeared to have once been part of a large family estate. Most of the original buildings were gone, but the land remained preserved as a public park. Emily stepped out of her car and immediately spotted the tree. Even from a distance, she knew it had to be the same oak. Its enormous branches stretched across the landscape exactly as they appeared in the old photograph. The sight sent a chill through her. The tree had survived decades. Somehow it had been waiting exactly where the note promised. Emily walked slowly toward it. As she approached, she noticed a small bronze plaque installed nearby. According to the inscription, the oak had become a local landmark more than 60 years earlier. Families had gathered there for generations. Weddings, reunions, and community events had taken place beneath its branches. Emily studied the old photograph again. The similarities were undeniable. The woman had stood in almost the exact spot where Emily was standing now. Suddenly, she noticed something carved into the tree's trunk. The markings were weathered but still visible. 2 initials enclosed inside a small heart. E and J. Emily frowned. The letters meant nothing to her, yet something about them felt important. Nearby, an elderly volunteer was tending flower beds along one of the walking paths. Emily approached and asked if he knew anything about the history of the property. The man smiled warmly. "A little. I have been volunteering here for years." Emily showed him the photograph. His eyes widened slightly. "Well, that is interesting. You recognize her?" Emily asked. "Not exactly," he replied. "But I recognize the family." Emily's heart skipped a beat. "What family?" The volunteer pointed toward the photograph. "The Jennings family used to own this land. They were well known around here many years ago." Emily stared at him. It was the first real clue she had received. "Do you know where I could learn more about them?" The man thought for a moment before giving her the name of a local historical society located nearby. According to him, Old records, photographs, and family archives were stored there. Emily thanked him and returned to her car. For the first time since the package arrived, the mystery felt less abstract. The pieces were beginning to connect. A family name, a location, a photograph. Yet as she drove toward the historical society, she could not shake the feeling that someone had carefully arranged every step of this journey. Whoever sent the package seemed determined to lead her toward a truth that had remained hidden for decades. The Historical Society occupied a small brick building near the center of town. From the outside, it appeared quiet and unremarkable, but inside it contained decades of local records, photographs, newspapers, and family archives. Emily entered carrying the photograph from the wooden box and immediately approached the front desk. An elderly woman named Margaret greeted her warmly and listened carefully as Emily explained that she was researching the Jennings family. The moment Margaret saw the photograph, her expression changed. "Where did you find this?" she asked softly. Emily hesitated. "It was part of something that was recently sent to me." Margaret studied the image again before leading Emily toward a research room filled with old documents. For nearly an hour, they searched through records connected to the Jennings family. The family had once owned significant property throughout the region and had been highly respected in the community. As Emily examined photographs displayed inside archival albums, a strange feeling settled over her. The young woman from the picture appeared repeatedly throughout the collection. Sometimes she stood beside the large oak tree. Other times she appeared at family gatherings or community events. Beneath one photograph, a caption identified her: Elizabeth Jennings. Emily stared at the name. Something about it felt unexpectedly important. Who was she? Emily asked. Margaret glanced at the photograph. Elizabeth was the daughter of Thomas Jennings. By all accounts, she was kind, intelligent, and deeply involved in charitable work. Emily continued turning pages. Then she found another photograph. This one nearly caused her to drop the album. Elizabeth Jennings looked almost identical to her. The resemblance was extraordinary. Similar eyes, similar smile, similar facial features. The woman could have been a close relative. Margaret noticed Emily's reaction immediately. "You see it too," she said quietly. Emily nodded. "I look like her." Margaret hesitated before speaking again. "There is something else you should see." She disappeared into a storage area and returned carrying a thin file folder. Inside were newspaper clippings and community records connected to the Jennings family. One article described Elizabeth's sudden disappearance from public life more than 35 years earlier. According to the report, she had left town unexpectedly and never returned to local events. Rumors circulated at the time, but no official explanation had ever been provided. Emily felt her pulse quicken. 35 years. Earlier. The same year she had been born. Before she could process the implication, another voice interrupted from behind. "I was wondering when someone would finally come asking about Elizabeth." Emily turned and saw a tall man standing near the doorway. He appeared to be in his early 40s, dressed professionally, but without any sign of arrogance. Margaret smiled. "Emily, this is Daniel Brooks. He serves on the board here and helps preserve many of our historical collections." Daniel stepped forward and extended his hand. "Nice to meet you." Emily shook it politely. Something about him suggested he already knew more than he was saying. Daniel glanced at the photograph in her hand. "That picture has been missing for many years." Emily frowned. "You recognize it?" "Yes," Daniel replied. "And I suspect you have far more questions than answers right now." The understatement almost made her laugh. Daniel looked thoughtful for a moment before continuing. "The truth about Elizabeth Jennings is complicated. Most people only know fragments of the story." Emily felt her heartbeat accelerate again. Every clue seemed to lead toward something larger. The package, the oak tree, the family archives. Now this stranger who seemed familiar with the mystery. As Daniel studied the photograph, his next words changed everything. "If you really want answers," he said, "you may need to prepare yourself for the possibility that this story is not about a stranger at all." Emily sat across from Daniel Brooks in a quiet corner of the Historical Society, struggling to process everything she had learned during the past few hours. What had started as an unexpected package on her front porch had now become a mystery connected to a family she had never heard of and a woman who looked remarkably like her. Daniel seemed to understand the weight of what she was feeling. He spoke calmly, choosing his words carefully. "Before you jump to conclusions," he said, "there are still pieces missing. Emily nodded. Then tell me what you know. Daniel opened a folder that Margaret had brought from the archives. Inside were copies of letters, newspaper clippings, and several photographs. He explained that Elizabeth Jennings had disappeared from public life shortly before the birth of a child. The official records were unusually vague. In fact, several documents appeared incomplete, as though portions of the story had been intentionally removed. Why would someone do that? Emily asked. Daniel leaned back thoughtfully. Families sometimes protect private matters, especially families with influence. Emily looked again at the photograph of Elizabeth. The resemblance felt impossible to ignore. Do you think she was related to me? Daniel hesitated. I think it is a possibility worth exploring. The answer was careful but honest. As they continued reviewing records, another detail emerged. Several letters referenced a close friendship between Elizabeth Jennings and a local nurse named Linda Harper. Emily froze. Linda Harper was her mother's maiden name. Daniel immediately noticed her reaction. You know that name? Emily slowly nodded. That is my mother. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The connection felt too significant to dismiss. Daniel quietly handed her one of the letters. The document was faded with age, but portions remained readable. Elizabeth thanked Linda for her loyalty and support during what she described as a difficult period in her life. Unfortunately, several lines were missing due to water damage. The most important details had disappeared. Yet, even without them, the letter confirmed that the two women had known each other well. Emily felt her heart racing. Questions she had never considered before suddenly demanded answers. Why had her mother never mentioned Elizabeth Jennings? Why had she reacted so strangely when shown the photograph? And why had someone waited 35 years to send this package now? Daniel listened as Emily shared her concerns. Rather than offering theories, he encouraged her to focus on evidence. The truth is somewhere in these records, he said. We just have not found it yet. Before leaving, Daniel gave her a business card. He explained that he had spent years helping preserve local history and had access to additional archives not available to the public. If she decided to continue searching, he would help. Emily thanked him sincerely. On the drive home, her mind replayed every detail from the day. The connection between Elizabeth and her mother felt especially important. By the time she arrived home, she had reached a decision. The next conversation with Linda would be different. She was no longer asking general questions. She needed direct answers. That evening, after Sophie had gone to bed, Emily carefully placed the photograph, the locket, and the letters on her kitchen table. Then she picked up her phone and called her mother. Linda answered on the second ring. Emily took a deep breath. Mom, she said quietly, we need to talk about Elizabeth Jennings. The silence that followed lasted only a few seconds, but it felt like an eternity. When Linda finally spoke, her voice sounded completely different. Emily, she whispered, there are things I should have told you a very long time ago. Emily barely slept that night. After ending the phone call with her mother, she had agreed to meet her the following afternoon. Linda refused to discuss the matter over the phone, insisting that some conversations needed to happen face to face. The seriousness in her voice only deepened Emily's anxiety. By the next day, countless possibilities had crossed her mind, yet none of them prepared her for what she was about to hear. Linda arrived at Emily's house shortly after lunch. Sophie was spending the afternoon with a classmate, giving them privacy. For several minutes, neither woman spoke. Linda sat at the kitchen table, staring at the photograph of Elizabeth Jennings. Her eyes filled with emotion. Finally, she took a deep breath. I always knew this day might come, she said quietly. Emily leaned forward. Then please tell me the truth. Linda nodded slowly. Elizabeth Jennings was my closest friend. Emily felt a mixture of relief and confusion. At least part of the mystery finally had an answer. But many questions remained. Linda explained that she and Elizabeth had met as young women and formed an unusually strong friendship. Despite coming from very different backgrounds, they trusted one another completely. Over time, Elizabeth became increasingly unhappy with the pressures surrounding her family's reputation and expectations. She wanted a simpler life and often spoke about leaving certain parts of her world behind. Emily listened carefully as pieces of the story began falling into place. Then Linda revealed something that changed everything. When you were born, she said softly, Elizabeth was there. Emily frowned. What do you mean? Linda looked directly into her eyes. She held you the day you entered this world. Emily felt her heart pounding. Why would she be there? Linda hesitated before answering. Because she cared about you very much. The response raised even more questions. Emily waited. She could sense that Linda was working toward something larger. Finally, her mother reached into her purse and removed an old envelope. I hoped I would never need to show you this, she said. Inside was a letter written decades earlier. The handwriting matched the letter from the wooden box. Emily immediately recognized it. Linda nodded. It was written by Elizabeth. With trembling hands, Emily began reading. The letter described gratitude, friendship, sacrifice, and a promise made between two women who cared deeply about a child. Several passages were emotional, but one sentence stood out above all others. No matter how far away I must go, a part of my heart will always belong to Emily. Emily lowered the letter and stared at her mother. Why would she write that about me? Tears formed in Linda's eyes. For years she had carried a secret she never intended to reveal. Because Elizabeth was more than my friend, she whispered. She was your biological mother. The room seemed to fall silent. Emily could hear nothing except the sound of her own heartbeat. Every clue suddenly took on new meaning. The photograph, the resemblance, the hidden letters, the mysterious package. Elizabeth Jennings was not a stranger from history. She was family. Emily struggled to process the revelation. Questions flooded her mind faster than she could speak them. Yet one stood above all the others. If Elizabeth was her biological mother, why had she disappeared? Linda understood the question before Emily asked it. Looking down at the old letter, she quietly said, "That is the part of the story I have never been able to tell you, because until now, I did not know the whole truth myself." The revelation stayed with Emily long after her mother left that afternoon. She sat alone at the kitchen table staring at the photograph of Elizabeth Jennings, trying to reconcile the image with everything she had believed about her life. For 35 years, she had known Linda as her mother. Linda had raised her, protected her, and loved her through every challenge. Nothing about that had changed. Yet now she also knew that another woman, a woman whose face looked so much like her own, had carried a secret connection to her from the very beginning. The discovery created emotions that were difficult to describe. There was confusion, sadness, gratitude, curiosity, and an overwhelming desire to understand what had really happened. Over the next several days, Emily and Daniel continued researching. The mystery had evolved beyond simply identifying Elizabeth. Now they needed to uncover the missing years and understand why she had vanished from public life. Daniel gained access to additional archival records through historical organizations and family collections. Most documents revealed little, but one afternoon he called Emily with excitement in his voice. "I found something," he said. They met that evening at the Historical Society. Waiting on the table was a collection of letters that had recently been donated by a distant member of the Jennings family. Many were routine correspondence, but one envelope immediately caught Daniel's attention because it had never been cataloged. The letter inside was written by Elizabeth several months after Emily's birth. As Emily carefully read the pages, tears formed in her eyes. Elizabeth described her love for a baby girl she could not publicly raise. She wrote about difficult family circumstances, personal pressures, and decisions that had broken her heart. Yet one passage stood out more than anything else. "I may not be able to remain in her life, but I will spend every year hoping she grows into the remarkable person I already know she can become." Emily struggled to continue reading. The words felt deeply personal despite the decades that separated them. More importantly, they revealed something unexpected. Elizabeth had not abandoned her out of indifference. She had made a painful sacrifice for reasons still not fully explained. Daniel quietly allowed Emily time to process the letter. Eventually, she noticed another document attached to the file. It was a legal record connected to a trust established many years earlier. The trust contained detailed instructions regarding a collection of personal items, family records, and financial assets. What surprised Emily most was the beneficiary name listed throughout the document. Emily Carter. Her own name. Daniel looked equally astonished. According to the paperwork, Elizabeth had arranged for certain belongings to remain protected until specific conditions were met. One condition referenced Emily reaching adulthood. Another required confirmation that she had established a family of her own. Every requirement had now been fulfilled. Suddenly, the timing of the mysterious package made sense. Someone had followed Elizabeth's instructions. The gift had not arrived by accident. It had been planned decades earlier. Emily sat in silence, absorbing the realization. For years, someone had been safeguarding pieces of her history. The wooden box, the letters, the photograph, and the locket had all been part of a carefully arranged message from the past. Yet one important question remained unanswered. Who had actually sent the package? Daniel examined the remaining documents and found a final note attached to the trust records. The note contained a name neither of them expected. It identified the individual responsible for carrying out Elizabeth's final wishes. As Emily read the signature, her eyes widened. She recognized the name immediately. It belonged to someone she had already met, someone who had been helping her search for answers from the very beginning. Emily stared at the signature again, hardly believing what she was seeing. The name listed as the executor of Elizabeth Jennings's final wishes was Daniel Brooks. For several seconds, she could not speak. Daniel looked equally uncomfortable as he realized the secret had finally been uncovered. "You knew?" Emily asked quietly. Daniel nodded. "Not everything, but more than I told you." He pulled out a chair and sat across from her. His expression carried no defensiveness, only honesty. "Several years ago, I became involved with the Jennings family archives through community preservation work. During that process, I was contacted by an attorney who managed a confidential trust established by Elizabeth. She left instructions that certain materials were to remain sealed until very specific conditions were met." Emily listened carefully. The emotions she felt were complicated. Part of her was frustrated that Daniel had withheld information. Another part understood that he had been honoring legal obligations. Daniel continued, "I was not allowed to reveal anything until the trust became active. Even then, I was instructed to guide the process rather than simply hand over the answers." He opened another folder and carefully removed a final letter. Unlike the others, this envelope was addressed directly to Emily. The handwriting was unmistakably Elizabeth's. Emily's hands trembled slightly as she opened it. The letter began with a simple greeting. "To my daughter, if you are reading this, then life has carried you farther than I ever had the chance to witness." Tears immediately filled Emily's eyes. Every word felt deeply personal. Elizabeth explained that circumstances beyond her control had forced difficult decisions when Emily was an infant. She never stopped loving her daughter, never stopped following updates from afar, and never stopped hoping that one day the truth would reach her. The letter described years of quiet observation through trusted friends who occasionally shared news about Emily's growth and achievements. Elizabeth wrote about learning that Emily excelled in school, built a life based on kindness, and eventually became a devoted mother herself. Most touching of all, she explained why the package had been sent now. She wanted Emily to discover the truth only after becoming a parent, because only then would she fully understand the depth of the sacrifices that love sometimes requires. As Emily reached the final page, she found a photograph she had never seen before. It showed Elizabeth holding a newborn baby wrapped in a soft blanket. On the back, a handwritten note read, "The happiest day of my life." Emily pressed the photograph against her chest. Years of unanswered questions suddenly felt less painful. The mystery had not revealed abandonment. It had revealed enduring love. Daniel quietly gave her time to absorb the moment. Eventually, he spoke again. "There is one more thing." He handed her a small key attached to a silver tag. According to the trust records, Elizabeth had left behind a private storage room containing journals, photographs, family memories, and personal messages intended specifically for Emily and Sophie. For the first time since receiving the mysterious package, Emily felt something stronger than confusion. She felt peace. Yet she also knew that one final chapter remained. Somewhere inside that room were the last pieces of a story that had waited 35 years to be told. 1 week later, Emily stood beside Daniel in front of a modest brick storage building on the edge of town. The small silver key rested in her hand as she unlocked the door that had remained closed for decades. Sophie stood beside her, holding her mother's hand. Daniel quietly stepped back, allowing them to enter first. The room was simple but carefully organized. Shelves lined the walls, filled with labeled boxes, photo albums, journals, and keepsakes. Nothing about the collection felt random. Every item had been preserved with extraordinary care. Emily slowly walked through the room, overwhelmed by the realization that someone had spent years protecting these pieces of her history. On one shelf, she discovered dozens of photographs documenting moments she had never known existed. There were pictures of Elizabeth at different stages of life, pictures of family gatherings beneath the oak tree, and even photographs of Linda and Elizabeth together as young women. Sophie eagerly helped sort through the albums while Emily examined the journals. Inside, she found years of handwritten reflections. Elizabeth had recorded her hopes, fears, dreams, and memories. Many entries mentioned Emily. Some described birthdays observed from a distance. Others celebrated milestones Elizabeth learned about through trusted friends. Again and again, one message appeared throughout the pages. Love, not regret, not resentment. Love. As the afternoon passed, Emily felt a growing sense of peace replacing the uncertainty that had consumed her for weeks. The mystery that began with an unexpected package had revealed something she never imagined. She had not been forgotten. She had been cherished. Near the back of the room, Emily discovered a final box marked with her name and Sophie's. Inside rested letters intended for future generations of the family. One letter was addressed specifically to Sophie. With Emily's permission, Sophie carefully opened it and began reading. The message welcomed her with warmth and encouragement, expressing hope that she would pursue her dreams with courage and kindness. Although Elizabeth never had the opportunity to meet her granddaughter, the words felt remarkably personal. Sophie hugged the letter tightly. "I think I would have liked her," she whispered. Emily smiled through tears. "I think she would have liked you too." Before leaving, Emily found one final envelope resting beneath the last journal. Unlike the others, it contained only a short message. Elizabeth wrote that every family carries stories that become lost with time, but truth has a way of finding its path home. She hoped that when Emily finally learned the full story, she would not focus on what had been taken away but on the love that had remained present through every year. Emily folded the letter and looked around the room one last time. For decades, unanswered questions had waited quietly behind a locked door. Now those questions finally had answers. Outside, the late afternoon sunlight filled the parking lot with a warm golden glow. Emily, Sophie, Daniel, and Linda stood together before leaving. The journey had uncovered family secrets, unexpected connections, and long-hidden truths, but it had also created something new: understanding, forgiveness, and a deeper appreciation for the people who had shaped her life. As they walked toward their cars, Emily glanced at Sophie and smiled. The mystery was over, but its greatest gift was not the revelation itself. It was the certainty that she belonged to a story built